Have you ever felt uneasy when someone knocks at your door, even when it's someone you care about? Have you ever rehearsed excuses just to protect your space? Closed the blinds when the doorbell rings? Felt your body tense at the idea of dropping by? If so, you're not broken. You're not rude. You're not antisocial. You're attuned. You are a person whose nervous system speaks in whispers, and those whispers say, I need space. I need silence. I need sovereignty. Carl Jung once said, solitude is not the absence of love, but its complement. And for people who guard their alone time, that quote is not just poetic, it's personal. Because what others call isolation, you experience as integration. You don't avoid people out of fear. You avoid performance. Small talk exhausts you. Unexpected visits feel like energetic invasion. Even well-meaning company can leave you drained, not because you dislike them, but because you lose access to yourself when someone else fills the room. And that quiet discomfort? That need to retreat when others arrive? It reveals something sacred. You are in deep relationship with your inner world. You feel more at home in thought than in conversation, more alive in reflection than in reaction. You don't fear connection, you fear losing yourself inside of it. And so, you protect your time the way others protect their possessions. Because for you, time alone is not an escape. It's where you return to yourself. You light a candle, not for mood, but for meaning. You walk slowly. You listen inward. You speak out loud only when your soul is ready to hear itself. And visitors, even kind ones, disrupt that rhythm. Not because they're wrong, but because they're external. And your soul? It speaks in internal language. So when someone shows up without warning, even with good intentions, you feel it as friction, an intrusion of sound into a world built on stillness. And while the world may not understand that, Jung would. Because in Jungian psychology, solitude is not a flaw. It's a stage of individuation, a sacred phase where the self meets the unconscious without interference, without mirrors, without performance. It's where the mask falls, where the soul stretches, where the mind unwinds. So when you say, I don't like having visitors, what you might really be saying is, I'm not willing to abandon my inner sanctuary just to appear socially acceptable. And that isn't arrogance, that's alignment. But still, you carry the guilt, don't you? The voice that says, you should be more open. You should be more inviting. You're too much in your own head. But that voice doesn't come from your soul. It comes from conditioning, from a world that values extroversion over introspection, visibility over depth, noise over nuance. And you are nuance. You don't dislike people. You just don't need them to be okay. You don't fear intimacy. You just define it differently. To you, intimacy is a soft gaze shared in silence. A quiet presence that doesn't disrupt the air, a kind of nearness that doesn't require entertainment. And when someone enters your space without invitation, without awareness, without attunement, it startles your nervous system. You don't want to explain yourself. You don't want to host. You don't want to mold your energy around someone else's presence, because for you, presence is not something you give away lightly. It's sacred, earned, protected. You don't dislike visitors. You dislike being unprepared for them, uncentered, unshielded. Because when you live in deep relationship with your inner self, your home becomes more than four walls. It becomes a reflection of your frequency. Every object, Every scent, every flicker of light is part of a delicate emotional ecosystem. And when someone enters abruptly, that frequency shifts. The room feels different. You feel different. It's not about mood, it's about resonance. And when someone's energy doesn't resonate with yours, you feel it like static, like emotional clutter, like a dissonance your body cannot ignore. Jung would call this an interruption of the self's integration process, a moment where the ego is pulled outward before the unconscious has finished its work within. And most people will never understand this, because most people never go that deep. They fill silence with sound. They fill space with presence. They fill their days with others so they don't have to meet the one person they've been avoiding, themselves. But you don't run from that meeting. You seek it. You need it. Because solitude, for you, is not a lack. It's a language. The language of your soul unfolding without interference. And visitors, especially unexpected ones, break that language. Not because they're bad, but because your nervous system is honest. It knows what it needs. It knows when to open and when to close. It knows the difference between true connection and energetic obligation. And so, you protect your door, your schedule, your quiet. Not out of coldness, but out of respect. Respect for your process. Respect for your peace. Respect for the person you're still becoming. Because here's the truth. Most won't say out loud. Many people don't knock to connect. They knock to distract from themselves, from their boredom, from their discomfort with silence. They come in talking, filling the room, projecting sound where you've been cultivating stillness. And suddenly, you're no longer present with yourself. You're performing, smiling, nodding, listening. Even when your inner world is quietly screaming, "I need space." But now, you no longer betray that voice. You no longer override your system to please the world. You no longer apologize for not wanting to host conversations that pull you out of your alignment. Because here's what your soul has taught you. Protecting your space is protecting your integration. And integration is not a luxury. It's a requirement for those who are committed to becoming whole. And so you stop apologizing. You stop explaining why the door stays locked, why the phone stays off, why the couch stays empty. You stop justifying your boundaries to people who benefit from you abandoning them. You start honoring the woman you've become in the stillness, the one who no longer lets guilt dictate her access, the one who doesn't feel broken for preferring solitude over social validation. Because that woman? She is not cold. She is not closed. She is simply rooted. And that rootedness is threatening to those who have built their identities on being constantly seen, constantly liked, constantly accompanied. But you no longer build for appearances. You build for alignment. Your life is not a showroom. It's a sanctuary. And not everyone is meant to enter. You used to question yourself. Used to wonder, am I too sensitive? Too private? Too cold? Because the world told you that warmth meant openness. That connection meant availability. That to be good, you had to be accessible. But now you know better. Now you understand. Not all love looks like a welcome mat. Sometimes love looks like a closed door and a lit candle inside. Sometimes it looks like silence, held with intention. You've learned the sacred difference between being alone and being in hiding. You're not hiding. You're healing. You're aligning. You're learning how to hear yourself without the noise of others. Because when someone enters your home, they don't just enter a space, they enter your energy field. And not everyone carries the kind of awareness that your nervous system can hold. You used to let them in anyway. You used to soften, to host, to manage the discomfort while smiling through it. But now you pause. Now you listen. Now you ask, is this visit nourishing? Or is it taking something I just got back? Because your energy is no longer up for grabs. Your time is no longer given out like candy. Your home is no longer a place for people who don't know how to tread lightly. Jung spoke of individuation as the sacred journey of becoming whole, of withdrawing from the collective long enough to discover the self beneath the roles. And you've been doing that work, in the stillness, in the shadows, in the Sunday mornings where no one called and you didn't want them to. That quiet? It was never empty. It was full of you. You met the parts of yourself that others talked over. You danced with the fears you used to numb with company. You touched the edges of your soul in ways no guest could ever witness. And in that, you learned something revolutionary. You are not lonely. You are deeply accompanied by your own truth. And truth requires space. It doesn't arrive when the room is full. It arrives when the inner noise finally stills. That's why you keep your circle small. That's why you hesitate to answer the knock. That's why even the idea of just stopping by feels like friction. Because every time someone enters your world, you feel it. Not just in your body, in your soul. And the ones who understand that, they don't knock loudly. They don't come uninvited. They move with reverence. They ask, "Is now a good time?" And they listen to your honest answer. Those are the people you let in. Not the ones who think love means constant presence, but the ones who know that presence without attunement is just pressure in disguise. You don't reject people. You reject disconnection disguised as closeness. You reject the idea that you must always be open just to be considered kind. You reject the expectation that your home, your body, your time should always be shared in order to prove your worth. Because you know now, your worth is not measured by how much of yourself you give away. It's measured by how intentionally you choose what and who gets access to your field. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, so be it. You no longer confuse their discomfort with your obligation. You no longer explain why the door is locked. You no longer apologize for needing time before answering a message, for not picking up the phone, for choosing yourself over performance, over pretending. Because this life you've built, this quiet, intentional, sacred life, it isn't cold, it isn't lonely, it isn't a rebellion against the world. It's a devotion to your soul, a soul that doesn't scream, it whispers. And when your space is filled with too many voices, you can't hear it. And the moment you learned that, really learned it, everything changed. You stopped inviting people just to keep them comfortable. You stopped saying yes when your body was trembling with no. You stopped decorating your discomfort with fake smiles and surface conversations. You stopped trading your peace for someone else's short-term validation. Because you finally understood, you're not here to be liked. You're here to be aligned. And alignment requires discernment. It requires boundaries. It requires long stretches of time where no one knocks and nothing happens, except the slow, holy process of remembering who you are when no one else is watching. That remembering, that's the soul's favorite state. And visitors, however well-meaning, interrupt that process if they don't come with reverence. So now you let them earn their way in. Through silence. Through respect. Through attunement. Not everyone gets a key. Not everyone gets to sit at your table. Not everyone gets to breathe in your energy just because they want to. And that doesn't make you difficult. That makes you sovereign. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And who you truly are isn't afraid to be alone. You don't resist visitors because you're broken. You resist them because your inner world has become too sacred to open on command. And those who understand that, they don't knock loudly. They wait for the invitation, and they bring silence with them when they come, because they know. True presence doesn't invade. It enters like light, softly, quietly, without force. And until someone arrives like that, you remain in your stillness, in your sanctuary, in your sovereignty. Not because you're avoiding love, but because you're refusing to abandon yourself ever again. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.